Yet more shocking claims of waste at Amazon. Another whistleblower came to us today with further allegations of just how widespread the practice is.
In every single facility it happens, trust me. I worked in one specific facility, but I knew other people who worked in others. And they said exactly the same thing. So it's not one facility that is happening, it's happening in all.
Also on News at 10 tonight. A good night for England, but Scotland's Euro dreams are dashed. Have 2 jabs, can travel with children, probably, maybe, perhaps, part 400. But when? Failed by the system, friends of Nikki Graham, the Big Brother contestant who died from anorexia, on why it must never be allowed to happen again, and... Remember this, the specials on what COVID has meant for Coventry's year as the city of culture and the band's attempts to get things moving again.
It was a big hope last year that things would improve and improve. Then they didn't improve, but now this feels a bit more optimistic.
This is ITV News at 10 with Tom Bradby.
Good evening. The scale of waste at just one Amazon warehouse in Scotland, exposed by our investigation yesterday, was very hard to believe. We revealed how from that site millions of items of unsold stock are destroyed every single year. But surely you might say that was a one-off. Well, apparently not. We've now heard testimony which widens this already very significant scandal. A former employee at a centre in England claims exactly the same thing happened when he worked there. Our investigation had already drawn the attention of environmental activist Greta Thunberg and Prime Minister Boris Johnson, and the government has now spoken with the online retailer about just what has been going on. One question is surely why products like laptops were being destroyed when many parents were desperate for them to homeschool their children during lockdown.
Up to this point, the destruction of so much unsold stock has in the UK only been documented in Dunfermline. Nearly 125,000 items in a week here, marked out with the word destroy. The vast majority in new or good condition. Our investigation putting pressure on the online giant across the world. But now testimony from another former employee who was a staff member at this Hertfordshire warehouse is strikingly similar.
You worked in the Hemel Hempstead branch within the last year. And what did you see?
I mean, lots of things, from brand new iPhones to PlayStations. We got rid of brand new books, people's latest novels that were coming out if they weren't selling. You felt like you just wanted to say to them, look, this should be going to people that need it, not going into a bin.
Our revelations yesterday showed this kind of thing happening in one warehouse in Scotland. Have you any doubt that it happens all over the UK?
In every single facility it happens, trust me. It does. Everyone I knew, I worked in one specific facility, but I knew other people who worked in others. They said exactly the same thing.
Businesses sell and store their goods with Amazon. If unsold, they're charged more until it's often too expensive. Chucking away new laptops when so many children were without one during the pandemic. We watched as the pallets were removed. Is something Shalane Young can't quite believe. She'd been in desperate need of one to homeschool her children.
I think it's absolutely disgusting. Even in lockdown, we've obviously had to do remote learning. Amazon throwing away so much devices, electronicals, that could go towards so much different families, social care homes, and it could help so much.
Anger within Westminster is growing. The business secretary has already spoken to the company, and another group of MPs are demanding an urgent meeting with Amazon's UK boss.
Amazon appeared before the Environmental Audit Select Committee last year and proclaimed their sustainability credentials. What your report uncovers is a truly astonishing degree of waste of resources. And if true, it is a scandal that Amazon have got to start to address.
But as long as what they're doing is not illegal, what can be done remains somewhat restricted.
And Richard is here to talk about all this. Look, I'm not really surprised because it was pretty shocking, but there's been quite a startling reaction to your investigation. I mean, is there a real sense that the pressure on Amazon is building a bit now?
I think it is, because there's been pick-up all over the world on this. I mean, here, politically, you mentioned the Prime Minister, the Business Secretary's got involved. MPs galore are piling in saying, we want to speak to Amazon's UK boss soon, quickly, to explain what on earth's going on. You've got environmentalists like Greta Thunberg getting involved. Amazon have just come to us in the last couple of minutes, actually, with a kind of reaffirmed statement saying they do make every attempt to resell products, but there are many reasons that they can't be reused because, sometimes they are ruined in effect. But there's no doubt a lot of these products are in OK state. We've seen the pictures. We featured tonight that employee from Hertfordshire. I've been spoken today to other employees with similar stories again. No word yet, of course, from Amazon's boss, Jeff Bezos. He steps down in about 2 weeks. Maybe he may make comment before he goes.
OK, Richard, thank you very much indeed. Now, moving on, and it was a night when Scotland's footballers dreamt, of course, of becoming the first side to reach the knockout stages of a major tournament. Sadly, as many of you will know by now, it was not to be. After that impressive draw against England, they needed to beat Croatia to progress at the Euros. Missing one of their key players, of course, Billy Gilmour. After he tested positive for COVID, they did what they had so far failed to do at this tournament, score a goal. Unfortunately, Croatia scored 3.
It is a 70s disco classic that the Tartan Army has adopted as their unofficial anthem for this Euro 2020. So as Scotland stood on the brink of sporting history this evening, its cohorts were boogieing on the streets around Hampden Park. There was more traditional music inside the stadium before the kick-off, and for some fans the emotion of this moment was almost too much. Scotland had to score a goal tonight, and they set about their task quickly. John McGinn fired in a cross early on, only for Shea Adams to be a layer of boot polish away from getting on the end of it.
Well, Perisic back post, Vlasic is there!
Then came Croatia's first opportunity to launch an attack, and they were much more clinical. Nikola Vlasic slotted the ball home for the opening goal. The Scots were soon back up the other end though, and although McGinn went close again, the best moment in Scotland's tournament so far came just before half-time.
To McGregor! Yes!
When Callum McGregor took a great first touch and hammered home the goal that fans watching in Hampden and in parks and pubs across this country had been longing to see. Quickly on display in the second half was a quality the Scottish team has in abundance: courage. With the game in the balance, the time had come for one of the finest footballers in the world to leave his mark on it. And with the outside of his boot, Luka Modric did just that. 15 minutes later, and the quality in the Croatian side told once again. A perfectly struck corner and a perfect header from Ivan Perisic. The Scots with too much to do, and for their fans, well, on their way out of the stadium tonight, the dancing was over.
Do you know what? We had a good time. At least we went out by scoring a goal. At least it would have been a bit worse having not scored a goal in the tournament.
I don't think we played as well as we did on Friday night, so I think we got what we deserved from the game, unfortunately.
Scotland's long-awaited reappearance in a major tournament is over sooner than their fans had hoped. Their players gave everything, but once again, on the biggest stage, the best they could do wasn't enough.
And Geraint is outside Hampden Park, where, of course, that game was played tonight. Geraint, what can you say? Familiar heartbreak for Scotland, really.
Yeah, I wish we were telling a different story tonight, Tom, but the fact is that Scotland were playing a team tonight which just 3 years ago was in a World Cup final, and it still contains enough quality players to be able to control a game and to slow it down when they need to, and then to speed it up when they want to as well. Scotland just didn't really have an answer for that, despite all the determination and the courage that they showed. Yes, they probably did miss the contribution that Billy Gilmore might have made. That's the player that they have missing because he's in self-isolation after testing positive for COVID-19. But I don't think any Scottish fans would tell you that his absence was the reason that they lost. They were given one magic moment when Callum McGregor scored in the first half. Hampden was only a quarter full tonight, but the Hampden roar sounded as loud as it ever has done.
OK, so close, but so far. Thank you very much indeed. All right, well, for England, there was considerably less jeopardy attached to their match tonight. Gareth Southgate's team already knew they had a place in the next round, so two players being forced to self-isolate after coming into close contact with Scotland's Billy Gilmore was not the calamity it might have been, even without them. England beat the Czech Republic to top the group. Now they must wait to see who comes next.
Events may have conspired against England in the build-up to tonight, but as usual, before every game, fans' optimism is overflowing. However, they were demanding to be entertained.
Coming home, baby!
Self-inflicted or not, if last day COVID chaos had unsettled the England camp, they were giving nothing away. Ahead, the chance to express themselves, excite the country, and top the group. If urgency was lacking last time out, tonight they rocketed out of the blocks. Raheem Sterling so close to doubling his and England's tournament tally. He didn't have to wait too much longer though. Fans' favourite Jack Grealish, a starter tonight, doing what he does best, finding Sterling to give an energetic England the breakthrough.
Finally, England fans have something to get them out of their chairs.
At the fan park in Croydon, like everywhere else around the country, elation mixed with a huge dollop of relief. It wasn't all going England's way, but when he was tested, Jordan Pickford passed with flying colours. If the first half was urgent and at times exhilarating, the second was its evil twin. Memorable only for Jordan Henderson, nearly getting his first England goal, but he was loitering too far forward.
Chalked off for offside.
After the lacklustre display against Scotland, tonight was a calm, mostly untroubled performance. England topped the group and will be back at Wembley next week. In Croydon, they were just happy to see another clean sheet and another win. Back at Wembley, the feeling was pretty similar.
Sterling's tournament, isn't it? Without him, it would have been nothing, would it? Do you know what I mean? But it's 3 points, so onwards, upwards, and I think we've got more in the locker.
It's coming home, we're back on Tuesday, and we're going all the way.
For all the criticism after the Scotland game, there is some comfort tonight that finally England seemed to have sparked into life. For a while, at least.
And there's an even greater incentive for England and all the rest of the teams left in this tournament to reach the last four, because today the government announced that it would allow more than 60,000 fans into the semi-finals and the finals here. They will be the largest crowds at a sporting event in England, in the UK in fact, for 15 months. There were fears that UEFA would hand those games to Hungary, just like they handed the Champions League final to Porto and not to Wembley. The sticking point has been quarantine-free travel to officials and for foreign fans, but those discussions are ongoing and we expect an official announcement in the coming days.
OK, Steve, thank you very much indeed. Now, on a kind of related subject, we keep hearing hints from the government about what it might finally decide we can or can't do when it comes to foreign trips this summer, or whatever will be left of it, whether we'd like to be on holiday or to see relatives or just to stop talking about it. Most of us are pretty fed up, and so too are travel companies. Today, TUI announced it's joining a legal action against the government. Health Secretary Matt Hancock says ministers are looking at allowing double-jab Brits to visit amber list countries without quarantining, and we understand unvaccinated children may also be included in that.
Can you just roll up your sleeve for me?
We are jabbing our way to freedom. Fully vaccinated adults may be allowed quarantine-free travel to many more countries under plans being considered by the government this week.
We are working on what extra freedoms people can have when they're double vaccinated, but we're not there yet, and we're going to be careful on this. We want to do it right, and we want to make sure that we protect people whilst also, of course, getting life back to normal
The change would apply to countries on the amber travel list, which includes France, Spain, Italy and Greece. ITV News understands ministers will also consider exempting children from the need to quarantine on return from amber list countries. Now that could mean family trips are possible before the end of the summer, but could also mean large numbers of unvaccinated children returning from countries where the risk of coronavirus is greater. And that does raise concerns.
Well, we know that children can catch and transmit COVID, so if we're concerned about adults potentially bringing COVID back in, then we should be concerned about children bringing back COVID, especially if they're going to countries where the rate is currently higher than it is in the UK.
Of course, other countries have rules on travel from the UK. If you're not vaccinated, France allows essential travel only. If you are, you still need a pre-departure test. Spain has no entry requirements to test or isolate on arrival, but the USA still has a ban on all visitors from the UK.
The variant is getting worse.
The Delta variant.
The Delta variant.
No, well, that's what they're worried about here as well, isn't it?
Lisette Savage hasn't been to see her parents in the Netherlands for nearly 18 months, and yet 2 jabs might still not be enough to get her there.
Even if they said, oh, you can go to an amber country, I'm not sure if I'd be allowed in because of them seeing the threat of the UK cases. It's been hard because I usually see them 4 or 5 times a year, if not more. We do, we're quite a close family, so it's hard.
And it is likely to remain a difficult year for both travellers and the travel industry.
Well, in the 30 years or so I've been covering politics for ITV, I find it hard to recall any subject on which any government has said quite so many contradictory things so often. So tonight we hand Carl the unenviable task of telling us, are we going to be able to go anywhere? And if so, when? Here you go. Here's the poison chalice.
It looks pretty likely, I have to say. The government's going to hold a meeting later this week where they're going to discuss this plan with the devolved administration. So it does have to be signed off by Edinburgh, Cardiff and Belfast. But the plan that's in front of them, should they decide to go for it, could be in place by, I'm told, July or August. July the 19th would make an awful lot of sense. So in time for a lot of school holidays to happen. Now, we are still being warned that, look, travel will be more possible this summer. It won't necessarily be easy. All these countries have their own rules and restrictions, as we've been hearing. Those could change. Countries could even potentially, I suppose, move from the amber list to the red list, and for that country, then you wouldn't be able to come back from there in this way without having to quarantine. But it is certainly looking a lot brighter, and clearly the government is calculating that by the time we get to that point of the summer, the vast majority of adults will have had 2 jabs, and the risk of children going away and coming back will be a much reduced one.
Well, I thought you handled it beautifully. Some clarity at last. Thank you very much, Carl. Now, the majority of COVID restrictions in Scotland should be lifted on August the 9th. See, nothing but good news on this programme. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon announced it today. She said that it would be possible if a series of vaccination milestones and other criteria are met. However, plans to move the entire country to the lowest level of restrictions have been pushed back 3 weeks to July the 19th due to rising cases. Now, at the heart of the government's so-called levelling up agenda is a promise that no community will be left behind. But for too long, for all kinds of reasons really, many children have indeed fallen behind their peers. Well, now a group of MPs have suggested that underachievement amongst white working-class pupils is in part down to years of systemic neglect. And they say more targeted funding is needed to help them catch up.
It has been a long-running and long-known problem in education. How to improve the results for white working-class children who consistently underachieve more than any other ethnic group. Today, a committee of MPs said the problem must be tackled after years of neglect.
There's been a lot of muddled thinking because people have just put it down to poverty. But if it was about poverty, you wouldn't have other ethnic groups on free school meals who are disadvantaged performing much better.
The report highlights that in 2019, the proportion of all free school meal pupils who passed their GCSE English and Maths was almost 23%. But for white British pupils on free school meals, the pass rate was less than 18%. Just 16% of that group started higher education by the age of 19, well below the 59% rate of black African counterparts. At St Wilfrid's Catholic School in Crawley, huge improvements have been made to bring up standards for all pupils. But despite this, the head teacher says the school is still suffering from a lower funding per pupil than schools in more affluent areas.
The levelling up hasn't happened. What has happened is that schools in more affluent areas have had some monies increased. We haven't had the same rates. West Sussex is in the bottom 10 of local authorities for education funding across England. So we're already at a disadvantage compared to other areas across the country.
These pupils are well aware of the risks for some students who are being failed by the system.
I worry that some students, just won't let them help them, or some people will just fall through the cracks.
But today's report blames phrases like white privilege for making the problem worse, an idea rejected by one former advisor to the Department for Education.
I think it's more helpful to think about it in terms of persistent disadvantage. So if you look at any community, white British or Black Caribbean or otherwise, where you've got children who are in families who have been disadvantaged for multiple generations, that is very difficult to deal with.
The government says it's committed to leaving no child behind, but those who teach in underprivileged areas say this report tells them what they've known for decades. The school system is simply failing some white working-class children, and only more funding will fix it. Dan Rivers, News at 10, Crawley.
It was a source of great shock and upset for many earlier this year when the former Big Brother contestant Nikki Graham died at the age of just 38. She had long struggled with anorexia and was admitted to hospital in March. She passed away a day after being discharged. Well, now friends of hers have told us they believe she could have been saved if the system was better funded.
This is the Nikki Graham her best friends will remember. As a contestant on Big Brother, she was known for her very public on-screen rants.
Who is she? Who is she?
But privately, she was fighting a much bigger battle against anorexia.
You could definitely see there was two sides of her. 1 minute she's like, I don't want help, and within the same sentence, she's asking for help.
But according to her best friends, Carly and Leon, Nikki never got the help she needed. They say her death in April at the age of 38 could and should have been prevented.
Do you feel that Nikki was let down?
I feel like Nikki was massively let down by the system. If there was more help out there and there was more funding, I feel like Nikki would have been saved.
Over the course of nearly 3 decades, they watched her come and go from NHS clinics until finally this year, in desperation, they were forced to fundraise to try and get her specialist private care. When Nikki collapsed in March this year and was admitted to Dorset County Hospital, her friends say their relief quickly turned to disbelief. After being treated for a spinal injury caused by the fall, Nikki was discharged. She was dangerously underweight and died the next day.
Why would you send someone home that's that critical? In the end, it was someone at that hospital that actually allowed her then and signed her to go home.
With people pleading to them to not let her leave.
The Trust told us staff were deeply saddened by Miss Graham's death and said a full internal investigation into her care is currently underway. Nikki's friends say that being in lockdown made her illness much worse, and she wasn't the only one struggling. Over the course of the past year, MPs heard today, demand for eating disorder services has increased by more than a fifth.
Lockdown brought a particular pressure and a particular strain on those young women who had been concealing, managing, living with eating disorders.
Nikki's friends are using the money they raised before her death to set up a foundation in her name. They want her legacy to be helping other people with eating disorders, but say there must also be more funding if there is to be any real change. Chloe Keedy, News at 10.
Incredibly shocking and heartbreaking story that is. Now, in the year 2021, someone coming out as gay certainly shouldn't be headline news, yet it remains such a rarity in the world of professional sport that when it does happen, people are bound to take notice. In fact, by coming out, American football star Carl Nassib did something no other active NFL player has ever done before.
That's an interception by Nassib.
For 5 years, Carl Nassib has played at the very top of his profession.
And the defensive lineman Nassib comes up with the play.
For 15 years, he's privately agonised about whether to publicly acknowledge his sexuality. Now he has, making him the first active NFL player to do so.
Just want to take a quick moment to say that I'm gay. I've been meaning to do this for a while now, but I finally feel comfortable enough to get it off my chest.
Carl Nassib has been a star player in some of America's most famous football teams.
Trying to escape 10 out.
But the world of team sport remains one of the parts of society where sexuality can be difficult to openly discuss.
I just think that representation and visibility are so important. I actually hope that one day videos like this and the whole coming out process are just not necessary.
In what is perhaps an indication of the challenges of his own journey, Carl Nassib has now donated $100,000 to the Trevor Project, a suicide prevention charity for LGBTQ youth. How important is it to you that somebody like Carl speaks out in the way that he has?
This announcement is incredibly important. I think it's going to inspire people. There shouldn't be barriers to your success based on your sexual orientation or your gender identity.
Carl Nassib's announcement has received welcome from sports stars across the world. That globally, he's in a very small group. It says much about how sexuality is still viewed in the sporting world. Emma Murphy, News at 10, in the United States.
In 1981, the Specials famously sung of deserted streets, clubs closing and bands not playing in their hit song Ghost Town. Sound familiar? Well, the band hail from Coventry, currently the UK's City of Culture. And to celebrate that honour, lead singer Terry Hall has organised a 4-day festival there. You know, the kind of thing people used to go to all the time.
40 years ago, he sang of the social and economic problems facing towns and cities like Coventry, the place where he was born. Now Terry Hall, the lead singer of the Specials, is back with his eyes on the future of Coventry. He is curating a 4-day festival from July the 29th as part of its City of Culture celebrations, a process made more difficult by the pandemic.
It was a big hope last year that things would improve and improve. Then they didn't improve, but now this feels a bit more optimistic.
You're feeling quite confident at the end of July it's going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to, as you just give in, really. You've got to, work towards something.
He remains immensely proud of the place Ghost Town, which topped the charts in 1981, and the two-tone music label have in the history of Coventry.
Over the years, when I've watched programmes about society, the moment I see Margaret Thatcher's face, I'm waiting for Ghost Town, and it always comes on. When I grew up in the 70s, pretty much all my family and extended family worked in the motor industry in Coventry, and one by one, they lost their jobs and there was nothing to turn to, really. There was no other skills to turn to. All 7 members were unemployed. Witnessed so much racial hatred. It was just a really bad state, and so we could highlight that, and that's all we could do, really. But it all helps.
Do you fear for all the ghost towns that we're potentially seeing now after the pandemic year that we've had?
I think what this last year has highlighted is the north-south divide. It's great that this is a city of culture because maybe it'll highlight something, but I think future city of culture should just be based in the north, really.
Radical.
Forget the south, they're all right.
For now, though, it is Coventry's year, and the city is intent on using all of its cultural treasures. Nina Nanar, News at 10 in Coventry.
Finally tonight, we have some exciting news of our own to report. Our coverage of the storming of the US Capitol in January has won the news category at the prestigious Golden Nymph Awards.
This is exactly what so many anticipated, and yet the Capitol Hill police are doing their best, but failing to control the situation.
Our correspondent Robert Moore, producer Sophie Alexander and cameraman Mark Davey were the only network news crew to enter the building with the rioters that day. And very proud of them we are. That's it. Good night.